get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And welcome aboard, Kneecaps Nation. You are locked and loaded once again for another edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, what you say, my friend?
Vince, it's been a couple of weeks,
I know it.
and we're in the off season here. So again, the kind of 2 weeks off of doing shows or whatever. Don't get too used to it, folks.
No.
We'll be back here before too long, as training camp gets going. But
probably another 6, 7,
absolutely
8 weeks, something like that. We'll be getting back to the full weekly swing of things here. But it's one of those things where you look around and there's a lot that's going on in sports. The NBA Finals just wrapped up. We have the Stanley Cup Finals in the house Sunday night as this is being recorded. We've got the World Cup going on. You got the College World Series going on. I mean, you've even got college football chit-chat about the kid from Texas Tech and the gambling and all that other fun business. The last thing that's on anybody's mind right now is the NFL, so naturally, Phil, that's what you and I are going to talk about. We're bucking trends left and right here.
Yeah, but, I think we got some pretty interesting things to talk about here tonight. I think, if you just kind of casually see that, new episode of the podcast, let's go ahead and take a look at what are these guys talking about. It is an off-season show, but some of it will be kind of getting caught up on some things that we may have missed. And I think some pretty good things to kind of light the fire this week as well.
Yeah, and that news you talked about, Phil, we didn't miss it by much. And what we're referring to is the Myles Garrett trade, because you and I cut our podcast May 31st. It dropped your devices the morning of June 1st, but later in the day on June 1st, which we kind of knew based on our conversations was going to be possibly a big day just because of the June 1st designations and its implications to the NFL calendar and what have you, that there might be a move or two that took place. Phil, this wasn't on my radar, and I'm pretty sure, speaking for you, it wasn't on your radar either. Myles Garrett, arguably the best at his position in the game of football, arguably, depending on where you sit on this argument, the best on his side of the ball in the game of football, goes from in a sense, a lifetime deal with the Cleveland Browns to now being a member of the NFC's LA Rams, a team that was already basically a shoo-in to be the favorite to be the Super Bowl champion for 2027, a Super Bowl that's going to be played at the home stadium for the LA Rams. So in this case, Phil, the rich get richer. Jared Verse, who's a young player who I think does have a very bright future in this league. He's already been off to a great start if you've paid any attention to what he's done for the Rams defense over the last couple of years. And a handful of draft capital goes over to the Browns as well. But boy, Phil, this sure is definitely, like we said, a rich get richer scenario. And again, arguably the best on his side of the ball, now over to the NFC, and that makes things just that much harder for a team like the Lions trying to get back on the right side of things and trying to get back to NFC Championship weekend.
Yeah.
And that's a tough blow for a team, again, like the Lions, trying to get back on the right side of things.
Yeah, it's certainly came as a shock and a surprise. I think a lot of us just kind of thought, when we were at the end of May there, that at most we knew we had the A.J. Brown trade that had been speculated out through Receding Gate, for the longest time here.
Yeah, I wonder how she knew all that, Phil.
NFL insider.
She's just that good at her job.
Right. But the thing is like it really is surprising. Not that the Rams made a bold move like this, but whether it was kind of resetting the organization with a new coaching staff in Cleveland with Todd Monken now, not really having a set number one. Word out of kind of the offseason is that Deshaun Watson still looks like he's terrible. You got Shador Sanders, who I would assume is probably going to be the starter for the majority of the year if he's
But let's
not
face
going
it,
to
he's
start.
also terrible.
Right? Like I don't think he's someone you want to hitch your wagon to for your future. So
And I read something that Dylan Gabriel doesn't even have a quarterback
number,
eligible number for this coming season. So if
what's that
that's
tell
not
you?
Cleveland Browns, yeah, what does that tell you?
That is Milton from Office Space with the stapler, memo, the writing on the wall, essentially, that his time is out. Um, but with Cleveland, this is a little bit of a reset for them. Incredibly talented player that they're getting in Jared Verse, but the combination of
And he's getting paid significantly less.
yeah, Myles Garrett going to, I think you can easily say that the most loaded roster in the NFL only is going to make them the prohibitive favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, they won the Super Bowl last year. I would assume they're going to be number two in the pecking order in the NFC West,
But
but
let's not forget they started offloading. They won
exactly.
their title and then they started shedding some players, shedding some contracts.
Yeah. So makes it real interesting. It is going to be a very, very interesting NFC. The thing that I want to know, there's two folds on the Ram side. I don't have really much more to say on the Browns than just sorry, Ohio.
And they got a new stadium coming, so they're probably trying to get all their ducks in a
Yeah.
row for a few years down the road. So, hey, keep punting, keep punting, keep punting, and maybe hopefully you'll be halfway decent when that new stadium comes in 2030 or whenever it is.
I want to know how much the Rams would have been though on the Micah Parsons trade. If they would have been a alternate candidate for the trade last year that ultimately went to the Packers from the Cowboys there, because I would assume it would have taken some of the same um, war chest to get this done. Maybe Jared Verse would have been moved to the Cowboys in that deal. Certainly don't like having Micah Parsons, even though he is banged up and going to be out for a while this season in division with the Packers. And then the second piece of the story, which is really interesting, that I don't think was initially known, and this is kind of the beauty of having some spaced out shows now, is this trade goes through, and I'm not sure where the reports or rumors started circulating, but now there's the fact that Aaron Donald may even come out of retirement to join him on that defensive line. And my God, would that be scary?
Yeah, and those rumors, if you will, have died off a little bit since the onset. And that may have just been a natural reaction of, well, hey, they're all in to win this thing. It's going to be essentially a de facto home game in the Super Bowl. If they can go all the way to that, it only makes sense for a guy like Aaron Donald, who retired young. He
Yeah.
still has some tread on those tires. A lot of it is just between the ears. Do I have that drive? Do I have that want to go out there? And we may not know anything more on this until training camp's over and done with, because let's face it, these retired vets, the last thing they want to do is have to go through the same BS that all the first, second, third year players have to do and all that. And maybe we hear more about this thing in 8 weeks from now or something like that, 10 weeks from now. But
Yeah.
the chitter chatter has died off a little bit on that. But yeah, I mean, insult to injury every which way. You get, again, arguably the best player at his position, if not his side of the ball, over to the Rams, and then one of the best at his position or side of the ball, how you look at it, and Aaron Donald comes out of retirement and says, hey, I want to give it one more run. I mean, Barry could never do that, right? Calvin could never do that, right? I mean, it's just
There would have been a shot maybe for Calvin when we were, that first real big year of success. But I think even then he had been out of the game for about 5 years. So
yeah, yeah.
I think it would have been pushing it quite a bit. But no, the thing with Donald is like I think he's still within the I want to say he's still only about 33, 34. I don't think he's terribly old.
And they
I
say
could
he stayed in shape. Of
I could
course,
see a
staying in physical shape
scenario.
and football shape, two different things.
Yeah, I could see a scenario where we start the season and then, if the Rams start to get out to a big lead, in the NFC, he comes back mid-season or something like that too.
So the big question was, how did this all come about? Because the Browns had committed to Garrett for the long haul, both publicly and privately. They signed a contract, or they had both sides rather signed a contract saying that you're going to be a Brown essentially as long as you want to. And as recently as like draft time, that's what the arrangement was always going to be.
Mhm.
So, how did we even get to this point in the first place? And what it sounds like, Phil, is the Rams just kept calling and calling and calling and calling and upping their offer and upping their offer and upping their offer until one day the Browns just said, you know what? Screw it. This is almost too good to pass up. And we shed $35 million a year off of our books to where we can parlay that into Lord knows what. I'm not as big on the draft capital that they're going to get on the back end because if this thing works out the way that we expect that it will, that the Rams are going to be really, really good in continuum until one day we wake up and they've hit the end of their runway. But those first round picks that they're owed are essentially going to be second round picks because, again, if they're any good, they're going to be picking so late in the first round, it's not going to make any difference. Again, I like Jared Verse as a player, and I think he's going to eventually do some great things for the Browns. But clearly, this makes, as we said, the Rams the top dogs in the NFC. And of course, word always leaks out of, okay, who else made inquiries besides the Rams? Sound like the Cowboys were in on it, but it sounded like they were more reticent to part with certain members of their defensive core or whoever the Browns were interested in obtaining from the Cowboys to where they backed off a little bit. But do you think the Lions were in on this at all? Yes? No? Mate? Nope. They weren't in on it at all.
No, no. Which is so weird because I think that's the thing that like is so maddening about this. We know where Brad came from, and it's like his role in that organization. Is he holding something against the F them picks mentality because he was so involved in the draft and he didn't get to do all those things when the Rams would continually trade some of those picks? I don't know, but it is very, very telling that his philosophy is significantly different from his mentor, or at least how his mentor is, kind of putting this all together for the Rams. And, um, you know, we don't have a Jared Verse level guy, I think, ready to go. One would argue that would be Hutch, and I think there are a handful of lines that are untouchable on this team. And yes, Myles Garrett would be phenomenal. I've heard some people banter around. Would you put Hutch in the deal? It just doesn't make sense. Like I wouldn't even begin there. And yeah, there's an improvement from Myles Garrett to Hutch, but I think Hutch is also an improvement on Jared Verse to some level there.
To some level.
Um, but again, I think it's just we as Lions fans never expect this to actually fall our way. But it would just be nice to hear that our name was somehow involved in or if perhaps it was the other flip of it, and Myles Garrett decided he wanted to get traded, and all of a sudden we were one of the three teams that possibly a target for him. But no, we
So,
can't have nice things.
right. So that got me to thinking just when this all went down and I'm reacting to it in real time, I'm thinking, because you've been doing this with me long enough now to where I've been pretty vocal about how I believe that getting somebody that is really able to be a disruptor of the opposing quarterback helps out in ways that I don't think gets a full amount of credit for. It helps out, of course, keeping the other team behind the sticks, keeping them off balance, off schedule, but it also goes a long way in helping your secondary. They're not having their ears pinned back. They're not on their heels. They're not overworking themselves. And for a unit like the Lions, who seem to have more of a, going back to that whole Legion of Whom thing from a season ago, I don't think that situation is any more closer to being resolved heading into 2026. So I think having somebody that can be opposite of Hutchinson to really put the pedal to the metal as far as getting somebody to disrupt that opposing quarterback, somebody to disrupt that opposing offense is critical if you really want to be a player in how things shake out when things are all said and done. And it got me to thinking, boy, if I were general manager for a day, I'd want to pull off something just like this. I'm happy
Yeah.
enough with how the receiving core is. I don't want to get some big time wide receiver in here because all that's going to do is disrupt the chemistry. And last thing we need is these big egos around here. I would like some level of upgrade over Jared Goff, but then it's the whole, okay, if you don't like my idea, what's yours? I don't really have a better idea. I don't really know specifically who I'd want to have better than Jared Goff. So in that end, I'd rather just leave that alone. The offensive line has been worked fine enough. What does that really leave for me to do if I was general manager for a day? Probably pull off a trade like we just talked about. So that leads me to throw it over to you, Phil. If you were Lions general manager for a day and you could pull off any move without concerns of what's going to happen 5 years from now, or we don't have enough room because we have to rework all these salaries to make it make sense or anything like that. We're just shooting from the hip here, Phil. If you were Lions general manager for a day, what kind of move would you pull off to get this team really clicking on all cylinders?
So I think we know the positions that you're going to have the most salary attached to them. I think we know where the Lions are going as far as contract extensions and making sure that, Brad wants to reward, his guys essentially. So for me, I've brought this up a number of times. I'm going to be okay, I guess, for now, with Derek Moore being the other defensive end opposite Hutch. But what I would do is I would target a starting cornerback and give up a second and a fourth, whatever you need. I take a look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers. I really like the two young corners that they have. They're both juniors, Joey Porter Jr. and Asante Samuel. Asante Samuel's on the expiring year of his deal. He used to be a Charger. I would try to get one of those guys for a handful of picks. And there's a number of cornerbacks that I think are in that level. Some things that really, really concern me about the cornerback room. The safety room is its own thing. I am hopeful that Brian Branch is going to be okay once he comes back from this Achilles. I don't think we got anything left in Kirby Joseph.
No,
I
and
really don't.
Campbell talked since you and I talked last, and we got about the farthest thing from a vote of confidence
Yeah.
that you could possibly get.
But I don't like the offseason stuff surrounding Terry and Arnold. Terry and Arnold also has been flagged way too many times. I think DJ Reed was playing hurt for a lot of the portion last year. We start going down that depth chart. Like, are we really going to rely upon Brock Yassin? Some of these other guys that the further down that depth chart, I don't think it's in great shape.
No.
And I think the problem is I think a guy like Derek Moore, like I think he's going to be good opposite Hutch, but I don't think he's the type of disruptive force that if we get to playing second string cornerback or safety, or it's practice squad guys again, like we've had in the previous years, I don't think that's going to be good enough back there. And I think we are going to get lit up on the back end of the defense. So for me, if I was Brad, I maybe wouldn't trade a first round pick, but some guy who's on an expiring deal that I would say younger than 27 or 28, see if you can negotiate like a second and a fourth or something like that to go get him.
What really grinds my gears, though, about this whole approach is that you've got two different schools of thought to be a part of. It's on one side, it's these all in to win Super Bowl moves that we've seen from the Rams, that we've seen from the Eagles. I think the Cowboys have the cojones to do such a thing. I think the execution hasn't quite been there for the most part, but you can tell the desire is there. So there's these big all in to win Super Bowl level moves. And then you've got these minutia getting better in the margins type moves that I feel like we see all far too often from the Lions. And that leads me to take notice of what's going on around me here. So it's like we saw it with the Packers. Okay, they've been doing a lot of what the Lions were doing, marginal improvements, this and that. But then they go out and get Micah Parsons a season ago. We've seen what the Bears have been able to do, essentially overhauling their whole offense, getting Ben Johnson in there, and now their offense is a force. Minnesota's kind of spinning their wheels a little bit, but they have a lot of pieces that at any one given time can really win you some football games. They've got Kevin O'Connell, about as bright of an offensive mind as any franchise in this league can ask for. And then that's not to mention the other teams around the NFC. And you just start to take the temperature of what's in our own house compared to what's going on around us. And then you start to ask yourself, Phil, what's something that we're good at that nobody else is good at? What's something that we have that everybody else wants? Do you think anything like that actually exists? Do you think the Lions kind of have an ace in their back pocket that is highly sought after? Or do you think a lot of these other teams have kind of lapped us up and there's really nothing that the Lions hold that true hardcore advantage over everybody else over?
So 2 years ago, I think you could have made the argument that it was the offensive line. We don't have that anymore. We got a lot of moving pieces. One thing that I will say that I think we have better than anyone else that you mentioned, um, I would have to reevaluate some of the other NFC teams, some of their moves just to figure out who went where. But I think the Lions have the best take it to the house speed of any team that I can think of as I'm saying this out loud in the NFC with the combination of Jamison Williams and Jameer Gibbs. They are true, get the ball in their hand and let magic happen. St. Brown, while he doesn't have the same speed, he is probably a top three, top five elusive player in the NFL too, as far as making things happen. I think between those three players, Lions have a lot of magic or making the most with as little as given to them as possible. To where the Lions have the opportunity sometimes to get a touchdown, to get a first down, to get a large gain out of something that for some other teams would stop at the line of scrimmage or stop in the backfield for a 3 yard loss. But that can also sometimes get the team in trouble, you know. I think sometimes, especially, they'll key in on some of those players a little too much. But I think those three players in particular are a unique skill set that the Lions are kind of in a one of one type of scenario that I can think of.
And we're going to get more into the weeds from a personnel standpoint as we get closer to the actual start of the regular season. And I know that you and I kind of brushed the surface back at the start of this offseason, but do you think that what we expect to see from Drew Petzing as a new offensive coordinator, do you think that what he brings to the table is going to maybe play up to those strengths? Or do you think maybe he's got something else in mind to where what you just mentioned could theoretically get watered down just a little bit?
I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we saw as far as his tendencies when he came in here was all the talk about the two tight ends. Obviously, Trey McBride in Arizona having some unreal stats, and if Sam Laporte is healthy, I mean, I think he's in line for a big season because of that. I don't know if it's a great personnel fit based on that. So I almost kind of think like he's going to come here. We're going to expect him to do all this two tight end stuff, and he'll probably still have some three tight end looks, or three not three tight end, but three receiver looks out there. Because I'm really curious what some of the roles of the guys on this offense are going to look like under his personality and techniques.
I mean, it can't possibly get any worse than John Morton, right?
No, no, no.
We didn't have a whole lot of expectations about John Morton, though, either. And I think maybe people are sort of walking a fine line of trepidation with Petzing here just because they look at what Arizona was, and it didn't work out with Kyler Murray, and they couldn't keep guys healthy at the running back position. It seemed like they never had an offensive line that anybody cared about. So nobody really knows what to expect because there's never been a apples to apples comparison to where we can say, okay, we just plug them in here and we look back at what happened and say 2023, and there's no such scenario like that exists. But that's again a conversation for another episode here. Last thing I want to touch on before we call this thing a day, Phil, is last time you and I talked, we just had the Jack Campbell extension, which again,
Yeah.
a surprise to literally no one. I think that you and I agreed that was the right move in all honesty. Are you catching any wind of anything coming down the pike with any other players? Because again, that's the Lions' MO. Extend their own guys and forget about what's behind curtain number two. So any rumblings that you're hearing with your NFL insider prowess here for maybe a Jahmyr Gibbs or somebody else?
Well, I think the thing is like now that we are kind of knee deep into the offseason here, there's always a possibility, behind closed doors or, enough people where it is, Brad off a text message, just reaching out to, representation for some of these players that something can happen. But um, I kind of don't anticipate anything happening until we get almost into training camp at this point. Like, I think Jack Campbell was the last one. I think that running back position is just so funky to try to figure out what you want to do. And I think everyone wants Jahmyr Gibbs here, but I think it's also got to make sense. Like, no one wants him to go to another team or anything. But I also don't think you can necessarily go ahead and mortgage everything away for that running back spot. So no, to answer your question, I haven't heard anything. I would venture though that unless we got something within a week or two after Jack Campbell, it's probably going to be a minute. This is kind of when some people take their annual vacations, in NFL league circles and things like that. Um, no pressure on you, Mike Rabel. Um, he's just doing yard work. I'm sure,
Yeah, yeah.
this time of year. But no, I think they'll get a couple things done, or at least we'll start to get some reports and rumors. The closer we get into late July.
I'm telling you what, though. I mean, we've talked about it before that running back position is just so volatile as far as what to expect from the
Yeah.
player from a longevity standpoint. And again, I've mentioned this before. You look at Chris Johnson all those years ago with the Titans, just this absolutely electric running back
Yep.
who kind of just burst onto the scene without really any notice. And he was great, 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 great until one day he wasn't. And then he just fell off the face of the earth. And I worry that something similar will happen to a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. He might give you a good year. He might give you a good 2 years. And then we wake up one morning and Jahmyr Gibbs just isn't any good anymore. And then we got to continue to pay him top dollar. He'll probably be the highest paid running back in the history of the NFL once this extension possibly inevitably gets signed. And you're left holding the bag if it hits the fan quicker than we want it to. Maybe you wonder if the Lions are being stalled by the Gibbs camp because they're waiting to see what a guy like Bijan Robinson gets down in Atlanta. It's a matter of maybe who blinks first or something like that. And that could play into it as well. But this whole throwing all this money to the running back instead of using that money to go out externally to make your team better, because Jahmyr Gibbs, with all due respect, he's already here. He doesn't make your team better. He keeps you what you already are. Let's not forget, Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't part of those bevy of players that was injured a season ago. He just didn't perform up to the level that we know that he's capable of. So re-signing Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't make the team better. It just keeps things status quo. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because he's not an addition to the personnel that we have in Allen Park. And, I think that's just the thing. I think you're absolutely spot on about, B. John Robinson. He was drafted ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm sure Gibbs is, really wanted to get more money than him too.
And
So
he's accomplished more as an NFL player, both individually and
absolutely.
what his team has done.
Yeah. So it's really going to be quite interesting to see, how it all progresses. And, um, it honestly wouldn't shock me if they extend someone else before Gibbs. If we're still waiting and we get into a situation where he just gets franchise tagged at some point, maybe that
Which,
is a play.
which, yeah,
I don't know.
and if he just goes out there and lights it on fire, then maybe you franchise him again
Yeah.
and just try
Yeah.
and squeeze as much of the toothpaste out as you can, because you know that every year that goes by, you're just 1 year closer to the air just blowing right out of the tire. So,
Yeah.
and then the question is, then if it's not Gibbs, because you're almost certain they're going to extend somebody else. I don't think Jack Campbell was the only extension they're going to hand out this offseason. Then the question becomes, who? What are you going to do? Give it to Laporta off back surgery or something like that? I mean, come on, Brad. Let's try and be better. But then again, this is the Lions we're talking about, and we haven't had nice things in Detroit Lions town for quite some time. So I guess why would we wake up one morning and expect things to be any different magically, you know?
Let's just not extend Giovanni Manu at this point.
The guy who
Let's
didn't
see if he
even
makes the team.
yeah, yeah. The guy who was hyped up as the next biggest thing
So
that nobody knew about in offensive line circles, and he could be delivering pizzas here in
So, real
maybe
quick note.
10 weeks.
I think it was Justin Rogers, formerly of the Detroit News,
Yes.
mentioned that he was hearing word that Manu no longer looking like a tackle, and he could actually be flipped inside to a guard. If you were wondering how that draft pick is playing out,
So to that end, what are we even doing here? Why is this guy still part of our organization?
I
Because
think he's
that's
going to get
why
cut.
you drafted him, was to
Yeah.
be that just freakazoid on the end. So if that's not who he is anymore, see ya.
See ya.
Sayonara. Yeah. Like Michael Kay on the Yes Network broadcast. See ya. All right.
Listen, I don't wish ill will against any guy, but again, when we talk about the philosophies and things that Brad hasn't done, it's those project picks. Those are ones that you know. I
Show me
think
you want to win a Super Bowl, and that does not show me that you want to win a Super Bowl.
I think you deserve to flex once in a while when you have a couple of good draft classes in a row. But there would just got to be a point of like too many flexes and too many projects, and I'm going to turn this guy into the next stud, that we need. And I think the Lions have tremendous coaches in place, especially on that offensive line and Hank Fraley. But like,
Sure.
if even he can't do something, then lost cause.
You can only turn you know what into chicken salad so many times over, until there's just nothing left.
Lemons into chicken salad.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's exactly it. Crazy. All right, Phil, we're going to take another couple of weeks off here, but you and I are going to be back before the 4th of July holiday. And I've got a topic up my sleeve that I really want to get into, but I'm not going to tell you what it is, and I'm not
Ooh.
obviously going to tell the listeners what it is either, because I want to kind of build the suspense for a couple of weeks from now here. But I think this is going to be the perfect time to do it before we're really able to get into the meat and potatoes of personnel and training camp and everything like that. But it's very relevant to everybody that I'm excited to spend some time delving into. You and I are going to have a good discussion about it. It's going to be a good episode. 2 weeks from now, you're not going to want to miss it.
So it's what former Lions player would you take into battle against the British Redcoats? That's what the topic is going to be, right?
You are so good, Phil. You've just been around me for too many years. You can see right into that brain like it's a see-through window. Crazy.
And my answer was going to be Corey Schlesinger. Give me that guy. Just dilapidated neck and all. Just
back,
going after
yep,
someone.
oversized shoulder pads and all. Gotta love it. That's all the time we got on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We appreciate you coming back after a couple of weeks off. Phil and I love hanging out with you guys every couple of weeks, and as we said, it's going to go back to once a week here before you know it. But we are trudging through this offseason little by little. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions, more down the field, over and out.